session of today. It's a great pleasure to introduce Leong, that I think most of you know very well. I'll be very brief. Sorry, Leong, but for the sake of time, Dr. Leon Chu is the inaugural director of the Advanced Imaging Center at Howard Hughes Medical Institute in the Janelia Research Campus. He serves on the scientific advisory boards of France Bioimaging, Euro Bioimaging, and currently chairs the Global Bioimaging, as you all know. Dr. Chu serves as the director of the Center of Advanced Microscopy at Northwestern University before. He has been keen interest in deciphering cytoskeleton regulation using advanced microscopy tools and tissue engineering. He is the founder of Imaging Latin America, which we are very happy to start this year here in Montevideo. And it's been a wonderful pleasure to work with you and your team to prepare all this that is coming next week. So this is very interesting and important for us. And the Africa Microscopy Initiative, an infrastructure and community building initiative for the whole continent of Africa. He will give us more insights into this today. And Leon, personally, I would want to thank you very much for all your support. You've been an important key player for us to be here doing this today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andres, for that wonderful introduction. First of all, I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate the Latin America Imaging Network. This is a moment that you guys should be very proud of. And for someone who has attended the very first exchange of experience of global bioimaging since God knows when until now, and to see this community come together, and is just an absolutely heartwarming moment. And thank you, Leonel, thank you, Andres, for having me be a part of this very momentous occasion. And I want to thank Global Bioimaging, Antje, Yara, Glab, for inviting me as well. So thank you very much. Most of you have heard the talk from Sunday, who, despite all his effort of doing everything right to try to join the Global Bioimaging Network, and he was stopped at the gate. This is an outrage, and this is why we started the Africa Microscopy Initiative, because we can no longer rely on infrastructure to draw people to the most advanced technology. We have to push technology all the way to where people need it the most, and this is why, thank you. Well, we have this initiative. Some of you may have heard this talk many times. For those who have not, so in short, Africa Microscopy Initiative is AMI. Some of you know how to speak French. You know that AMI is the French word for friend. This is right away a tip of the hat for more than 40% of the population in Africa who speak French. And more importantly, this is a very important message that this is truly a gesture of friendship through microscopy. So let's talk about why am I getting involved in Africa to begin with. So let's start with what my day job actually is, which is to run the Advanced Imaging Center at Janelia. The AIC, in short, is to basically make Janelia develop instruments that are not yet commercially available, accessible to the rest of the world, right? If you write a proposal, if your proposal is accepted, you get to come to Janelia. We cover the cost of your lodging. We cover the cost of the experiment. The microscope is yours 24/7. Application scientists' time, some of them are sitting in the audience, will be dedicated to your project. And as you can imagine, with this kind of opportunity, we got a lot of proposals from all over the world. And usually this is a map that I'm very proud of because it shows that proposals come from all 6 different continents, like the missing continent being Antarctica. But today I'm going to use this map to show that AIC has failed in one very important aspect, in the sense that for the past 8 years in the entire history of AIC, we have catered predominantly to the very affluent countries in the world. And that is unacceptable. So we start to think about where is the failure, and in this entire process, why we are not reaching the underprivileged communities in the world. By the way, Uruguay, awesome. And so when you look at the map, the most underrepresented continent in the world is Africa by population. And in the 8 years of history of AIC, we have received a single proposal coming from Africa, and that is just simply not good enough. And so, as Karen has mentioned earlier, right before the pandemic, we decided to run a workshop, just more like a landscaping experiment, just to see what we can do in Africa. So we use the Imaging Africa workshop as an excuse to go to Cape Town. So this is funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Moore Foundation, as well as Janelia, as well as the CIDRI at UCT. And if you were to run a landscaping experiment, you cannot get a more clear-cut result than this. We have 24 positions in the workshop, more than 700 people applied. So that is about as loud and clear a message as you can possibly get, that we have hit something extremely important, something that is in severe demand, that is unmet. And after we got over the initial panic of how we're going to read 700 proposal, we managed to actually wrote a little bit of a software to help us read it. And right before the pandemic, in January of 2020, we did run this workshop, which is now chronicled in this paper that was published recently. So in addition to just being underrepresented in the AIC application, one of the very important questions that we all have to ask is, why are we doing this in Africa? And a lot of time when I give this talk, there will always be somebody in the audience that say, do they really need microscope? Can we in the global north, to paraphrase, do the research for them? And the answer is an absolute no. And here's the reason why. And if you look at the disease burden, and these are some of the key diseases that are happening in Africa, right? So not surprisingly, HIV, AIDS, and a lot of lower respiratory infection and diarrheal disease, malaria and TB, and so on and so forth are ranked that way. And as you can imagine, these are the ones that really affect African population. And surprisingly, cancer is actually pretty low on the list. Not because they don't get cancer as much, it's just that all the other diseases are significantly more prevalent. But if you look at the basic research in terms of the amount of funding that goes into African research, and in terms of the number of articles published, now you start to see the disparity between what is truly being needed on the ground versus what kind of research the West is funding for Africa. AIDS is still pretty well represented because it hits a lot of other parts of the world. And then when it comes to diarrheal disease, lower respiratory infection, it starts to drop. And then malaria picked up again because, again, malaria is prevalent in a lot of other continents. And then some of you know that I'm actually from Malaysia, a country that has been repeatedly colonized over and over again. So I'm going to show you, this is a sign of neocolonialism right there, is when you look at the clinical trials, it's how many drugs are being tested in Africa. Look at the disparity that even though the cancer is not prevalent, it is being conducted a lot. So you cannot leave the research against diseases in Africa in the hands of the global north. You have to empower African scientists or local scientists in any regions of the world to be able to do their own research. So when we were there, we have the opportunity to talk to a lot of scientists, and we did a lot of listening without talking, which is kind of important. And so when we can kind of sort of classify the current challenges of to accessibility to technologies and expertise specifically concerning microscopy in several stages. In the worst possible stage is that the local scientists can actually use microscopy, but they don't even know that microscopy can help them. The idea of using a microscope to solve their experimental problem simply does not occur to them, because they're so, the disconnect is so vast that they have never really thought about using a microscope, or contributed by the misunderstanding of what microscope can do. Slightly better, but by not much, is that some of the local scientists realize that they can absolutely use a microscope, but there is no microscope available. So why bother? And then the idea flashed across their mind for about 5 seconds, and then they give up. So as you can imagine, the attrition rate here is really, really bad. And then for the lucky few, like those who managed to attend a workshop like Imaging Africa, yeah, and then so they get to be exposed to what microscope can do, especially what some of the advanced microscopy techniques can do. But even in this situation, when out of good intention, you're trying to run a workshop in Africa, you have to manage that situation very carefully. Because the idea is that if now they are exposed to all this truly wonderful techniques, and then they go back to their home institution, they have no access to microscope. Guess what happened? You are just creating an antecedent for future brain drain out of Africa. It's not serving Africa at all. So we have to manage that very carefully. Now, in some selected, more affluent cities in Africa, there are certainly research centers of excellence where a lot of modern microscopes are available. Now, what is the most ironic thing of them all is that imaging centers like the Advanced Imaging Center, and also the imaging center at EMBL, which you're going to hear Jan talk about tomorrow, those imaging centers are completely accessible to everybody who work with nonprofit organizations in the world. But for a lot of people to be able to access those advanced imaging centers anywhere in the world, the hoops that they have to jump through is just too significant, and you're not going to be able to cater to all of them. And this is a very important take-home message: is that if you make your imaging center equally accessible, they will never be equitably accessed. It will always cater to the wealthy, and as our own AIC data has suggested. So we have to figure out a way to how to beat this vicious cycle. And one way to beat the vicious cycle is to create a virtuous cycle. In the vicious cycle, every step drags you down. In virtuous cycle, every step drags you up. And this is what we are trying to do. So the lucky thing is that the most expensive part is actually done. The AIC Imaging Center, the EMBL Imaging Center are already built, and a lot of others in the world that have open access. And what we want to do now is to see whether or not we can also create a Pan-Africa open access microscopy center in the model of the Advanced Imaging Center at Janelia and EMBL, and also maybe use that imaging center as a incubator for potentially high impact project to develop. And then we are also going to create an instrument distribution program, because having a few microscopes in one city in Africa is not going to solve anything. It's a big continent. And so we have to swamp that entire continent with a lot more microscopes than that. And then we're going to continue to push the awareness of microscopy, and also the knowledge of how to use advanced imaging technique, and even basic microscopy techniques. So we're going to continue to run Imaging Africa workshop, and maybe even help create satellite workshop. And last but not least, we're going to have to create some sort of a trainer program, and this will involve us getting the whole world involved. And I'm going to show you how we're going to get the whole world involved. And then we're also going to do a webinar series. So all these steps together constitute the Africa Microscopy Initiative. And so I'm going to go through them one by one just to give you an idea. So the Army Imaging Center will be built, and we were hoping to cut the ribbon in October in Cape Town. So stay tuned to that event. So it is a fully open access microscopy center, just like the AIC at Janelia. It is for scientists working with nonprofit institutions in Africa. It is accessible through peer review proposal, just like the AIC, and it will be accessible at no cost. Lodging will be covered just like the AIC, but we will take it one step further. Even your travel from any part of Africa to Cape Town, the imaging center will cover it. And we also hope that we can use this imaging center to start to introduce the collaborative spirit that sometimes is lacking in Africa. It's not that African scientists don't collaborate. They tend to collaborate with the Western world. The grass is greener on the other side mentality, which we'll hopefully will be trying to also be able to minimize and to help them recognize that a lot of their own colleagues working in Africa are doing absolutely amazing science, and we want them to collaborate. So basically, any proposal that is submitted jointly by multiple investigators from different institutions will be viewed favorably, everything else being equal. And the same imaging center can also serve as a project incubator, in the sense that if we come across a project that can potentially have very high impact, that has high promise, and that imaging center can now give that project ample time to develop, to mature, so that they become globally competitive, that at some point they might be able to come to the even more advanced imaging center worldwide to start taking advantage of more and more and more modern technology, right? So that is a good way to pave the way so that you give people a chance to develop their project that they will never be able to do otherwise back home. And I always like to skip through the peer program and then go to the Imaging Africa first. You have heard from Karen as well as from Sunday. This has been probably the driving force behind the whole thing is this Imaging Africa workshop. And we will gonna continue this. So immediately after we run the Imaging Latin America, guess what? We're actually packing our bag and fly to South Africa and do it one more time for the African continent. And we're gonna and this will probably be the last time for a very long time that we're gonna run Imaging Africa in Cape Town, because we want to take it on a tour in other parts of Africa. And we're also gonna create regional satellite workshops with more focused emphasis. Instead of going to remote places and show them what they can do with advanced microscope, go there and show them what they can use their local microscope for. Use it to the fullest, you use it wisely. And then this is how we're gonna mobilize the whole world. Just the AIC alone, we have what? 7 people, 8 people. There's no way we can really make any impact at all in Africa. And that is when we have to think creatively how we can mobilize all this very talented, very passionate imaging scientists from all over the world to help out. And that is through this program called Partners in Teaching, or PITCH. So this is a fellowship program. And the idea is that it is going to be open to the whole world, not only for African imaging scientists or early career stage lecturer, but also early career stage imaging scientists all over the world. And when all the application comes in, we're gonna actually separate them into 2 pools, the African applicant pool, and as well as the international pool. And then the top few candidates from each pool will be selected, and then they will be paired. And then the idea is that this paired will be mentored by folks who are very experienced in running international workshops. And so the idea is that this pair will get the proper mentorship, they will get a friend, a partner to lean on, so they don't have to worry about running the entire program and imaging workshop all by themselves, and they will always be a partner and a mentor. And when the mentor thinks that this pair is ready, there'll be some funding for the pair to go to the home institution of the African counterpart and run that workshop locally. And so this is one way where we think we can actually encourage and incentivize a lot of early career stage imaging scientists from all over the world who are hungry for this opportunity. Just imagine what it would look like to have an event like this on your CV, that you have created a workshop that you run in Africa with a partner. And so hopefully with this kind of opportunity, we'll be able to mobilize a lot of people from all over the world to help out. And then we are also going to create a webinar called Microscopy Matters. So there are a lot of webinars out there on YouTube. And the reason why we are still purposely trying to reinvent the wheel is because on a continent like Africa, representation matters, and it matters significantly. What we want to do is to create a webinar series where it is truly by African imaging scientists and for the African scientific community. And so this will be a collection of brief topics that are presented in a webinar format and presented predominantly by African, especially those who have attended the Imaging Africa workshop. Now I'm going to come back and talk about peer, and this is how we are going to be able to bring instruments from all over the world into Africa. And so the peer stands for Program for Equipment Exchange and Reutilization. And I always like to tell this story. This is actually an actual conversation that I had with Kenny, who is the US ZEISS president. And most of you know that every few years, company like ZEISS, company like Leica, Nikon, they come up with a new microscope. Confocal, could be light sheet, could be anything. And to entice their customer base to buy the new model, they basically create this trade-in program. You trade in your 2-year-old, 3-year-old program, microscope, which are as we all know, perfectly functional. And then you will get the new instruments with a serious discount. That's all sound nice and good, but all these traded in instruments sit in the warehouse of these companies. And at a certain point, they actually incur so much cost that it is actually more expensive. It's actually cheaper to throw those microscopes away than to keep them. And at one time, as Kenny was telling me, just in the New York warehouse alone, they have to call in a waste company and took 17 perfectly functional confocal to the landfills because it is cheaper to throw them out. That is just unacceptable. It is unacceptable to us. It is definitely unacceptable to ZEISS as well, because they could not write it off as a tax break. They could not really, just heartbreaking to see all those perfectly good instruments go to waste, as any human or any company would do. So wouldn't it be nice if we can find a way to channel those instruments into Africa? And this is what we're going to do. So we're going to be working with company like ZEISS and hopefully other company as well, as we're negotiating with them. And is to basically create a repository of available instruments. And then we're going to announce it maybe on a rolling basis. And then any institution in Africa can submit an application. And this is where we're going to put a twist to it and start to use this opportunity to also introducing a lot of cultures that are currently still pretty foreign in Africa. And one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that the instruments is not just going into an institution without any local support, without any local point technical person. So any applicant institution have to commit 2 full-time employees who will be fully trained by this company and maybe even come to Cape Town to be further trained. And then so that when they go back, when this instrument is set up, they are now fully trained technical person who can support the local usage. And then they will also have to provide a little bit of service contract, maybe not the full blown, but anything that is free has no value. So we want to make sure that there is a little bit of a skin in the game in this process. And if your institution is selected, this 2 designated FTE will receive the full training. And then more importantly, the microscope will now be set up as a core facility service. A concept that is still extremely foreign in Africa. Over there, sometimes the more expensive the instrument is, the less likely it will be shared because people are afraid that people will just break it. Whereas in other parts of the world, the more expensive it is, the more likely that instrument will be shared. So we're going to change that culture through this application process as well. So in a nutshell, that is the peer program, and in a nutshell, that is the entire AMI initiative. So this is the conceptually what AMI is, and I'm going to take the rest, hopefully 2 or 3 minutes, maybe longer, to go through some of the very important partner. We definitely need a host institution to be able to house the imaging center. We need commercial partners. We also need global network partners. So I'm going to go through them very quickly in the interest of time. And as Karen has mentioned, the first Army Imaging Center will be set up in Cape Town at the University of Cape Town. And as you can imagine, UCT will provide all the necessary support. It is also kind of surreal to actually look at the floor plan across the Atlantic during the pandemic and just zooming all day long, just look at floor plan, but that's what I did. And then this is a very important thing is UCT is so inspired by this entire initiative that they are starting to think about whether or not they can create a master's and a PhD program in imaging science. So basically how to apply microscopy in life science, not optical physics. There are only 2 or 3 places in the world where such master's and PhD program is available. There is none in the United States, for example. So if UCT can come up with this, or Africa Microscopy Initiative can help UCT come up with this program, South Africa would have beaten the United States. Isn't that awesome? And then we also, hopefully we'll be able to convince them to also do a image data science in infectious disease, either a master's or a PhD program. This is where, in a way, is dovetail with what Herbert has just said, is how we can not only attract talent, but how we can create an unlimited source of talent, which is probably the biggest asset of Africa. And like that, we're going to, through Army, we're going to expose a lot of the young African scientists to career in academia and core facility, as well as in industry. Now I want to sort of bring up 2 commercial partner, Tissuegnostics in Vienna, who donated quite a lot of their product to Army, but I want to focus more on Zeiss because what they have done for Army is just frankly quite amazing. They are going to continue to support Imaging Africa workshop just like they did with Imaging Latin America. And they are going to donate teaching microscopes as well as providing the instrument recycling program logistics, especially for Zeiss instrument. And then they are going to continue to provide support for the Army Imaging Center. They are also going to train the application scientists at the Army Imaging Center in Cape Town to the level where they can probably run a lot of the software-driven diagnostics, so that when the German engineers showed up, the engineer would have the right parts in their luggage rather than have to wait for Germany to ship it out. And they are going to also donate the cloud-based deep learning software up here for the imaging center. They will obviously, this is a great place for Zeiss to launch their new technology. And then Zeiss is actually going to create a sponsorship for African imaging scientists to attend any microscopy workshop in the United States as a guest of Zeiss. There will be a job shadowing opportunity for the Zeiss Imaging Center at Harvard, and then also a postgraduate scholarship for the master's and the PhD program. That is quite a lot for a company to commit, and so thank you very much. And of course, we also need a lot of international partners, and you have heard Antje talk quite a bit, and also Jan Eriksson talked a bit about Eurobioimaging. We have a cadre of absolutely fantastic imaging centers in Europe as a network, and especially France bioimaging, because you cannot go into to do things in Africa without involving the French, obviously. So they will provide advice for the UCT PhD and master program curriculum. They're going to probably, hopefully, create student exchange program, and then hopefully get involved as well in the pitch program. This is the partner in teaching program. And then those imaging centers, the many that you have heard, John Eriksson mentioned this morning, are great platforms for a lot of the African scientists who want to learn how to run a imaging center to be able to attend. So we will create job shadowing program, maybe even help create online curriculum as well. And last but not least is the African Bioimaging Consortium. You have heard Karen talk about it several times this week alone. This is actually created also during the pandemic. We realized very quickly that the Africa Microscopy Initiative cannot propel itself without a coherent, well-organized community to help push it. And so in collaboration with Mike and collaboration with Karen and Sunday and a lot of others. And thank you, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, for supporting the formation of the African Bioimaging Consortium. We managed to pull the entire community together. This is the counterpart of BINA in Africa. And this is completely done during the pandemic. And it will be a network of African imaging scientists. They are now working on an online educational tools. You're going to probably hear from Lisa from Stellenbosch. And then they will be the most effective outreach partner for AMI. And more importantly, and this is something that Lionel and Andres and I have been discussing for a long time, when you have a community that is organized, you become a very powerful dialogue partners with the stakeholders in your local government. And this is what the ABIC also aspires to do, and to be able to steer funding and, or more importantly, draw attention to microscopy and basic science research in Africa, and so on and so forth. And so I'm very grateful. And again, this happened during everything happened during the pandemic, that I managed to convince CZI as well as the Gates Foundation to jointly fund the Africa Microscopy Initiative. And this is the first time the two funding agencies have ever worked together on a microscopy front. And so we now have a little bit of a momentum going forward. And I really look forward to the opening of this entire initiative in October. There are a lot of people to thank, both back home and in the audience. But I just want to single out one person in the audience, and that's Vlad. During the pandemic, I have no idea how many hours you have spent listening to me. So thank you.
We have time for one question, and we can follow up the discussion. Yeah.
I don't have any questions. I have a tribute. So all of that started from idea. And Leon was always there was such a vivid vision of the center. Every time we discussed that, it was very clear, and it's always very well thought. Every single step, every single question that we could ask, it was already provided. So what I want to say is, all of these projects, it requires a mind, it requires a person that would bring all of the stakeholders together. And you can see that this will be a very transformative thing, which we're very, very sure of. So Leon, this is a fantastic way. I think your input or impact in the development of the microscopy communities is hard to overestimate.
Thank you. Any other question?
Thank you. Right, we can go on and talk with Leong over the sunset. That's why we're a little bit in a hurry, because we need to run there to see the sunset before it's gone.